Now we will discuss the famous authors related to New Historicism. So, first of all, Michel Foucault. He was a French philosopher and critic who paved the way for postmodernism, and he viewed that knowledge is controlled by people who have power, hence, it becomes a form of social control. All the powerful people are all the time present in society and they can control the society in their own way. What sort of knowledge, what sort of control they want to establish in society, that will be followed by the people. His pervasive image of the state is of panoptic surveillance. Surveillance means scrutiny. Panoptic means all seeing. The state is all the time there to see about all the activities of the people, and it can also scrutinize all these activities. The panopticon was a design for a circular prison conceived by 18th century utilitarian Jeremy Bentham, and the design consisted for tiered ranks of cells which could all be surveyed by a single warder positioned at the center of the circle. The panoptic state maintains its surveillance not by physical force and intimidation, but by the power of its discursive practices. And this is to use Foucault's terminology of discursive as an adjective, which was derived from the particular noun of discourse. Uh, the discursive practices which circulates its ideology throughout the body politic. You may say, again, I'll quote, that discourse is not just a way of speaking or writing, but the whole mental set and ideology which encloses the thinking of all members of a given society. Surveillance is a more intelligent and subtle form of control based on minds rather than on physical bodies. This was the idea of Foucault. His book Discipline and Punishment, which was published in 1975, discusses or conveys the idea that history of prison and punishment carried out by a lawful state to create a sense of fear among people of the state. If it is lawful punishment, if it is based on some justice, then it will be able to create a sort of fear among the people. Metaphor of prison explains that state controls people not by capturing their bodies but by capturing their minds and souls, and this is the real control so far as the control in its literal form is concerned. His next book, History of Sexuality, which was published in 1976, argues that sexuality is not a determined or fixed fact, but it's a fluid, malleable concept and social construct that can be changed. That can be changed by the time, that can be enforced by the time. Whatever sexuality or sex were in their literal sense or in their original sense or original meaning, these things can be changed, these things can be cited, these things are able to add something in them by the time. So men and women can experience within their lives a transformation of genders. So from this transformation of genders and history of sexuality, the whole scenario of the culture gets its radical change. The book liberated the idea of homosexuality from the shackles of orthodox laws and traditions. The old rules and regulations were against the idea of homosexuality, but with the publication of this book of History of Sexuality, it gave the sort of liberation and freedom, personal freedom to people to become homosexual. Foucault didn't have complete faith in judiciary. As per him, the idea of justice is also attached to power. So, after Foucault till today, most of the societies are running in the same way, that justice is not present over there because of the powerful people, because they had different sorts of resources and they can become free with the help of those resources or the using their approach. Whereas the poorer, the lowers, as well as the others, are the marginalized people, are all the time there to suffer from non-availability of justice. His works like Madness and Civilization, The Order of Things, Simultaneously, these works were published in 1964 and 1966, convey the same idea of power, justice, and subjugation of the people. Foucault used the term discursive, which stands for discourse, and it is whole mental set and ideology which encloses the thinking of all members of a given society. It is not a singular but a multiple, so that the state is seen as a monolithic structure and change becomes almost impossible. Foucault's work looks at the institutions which enable this power to be maintained, such as state punishment, prisons, the medical profession, and legislation about sexuality. You may also say that Foucault makes a less rigid distinction than is found in Althusser, who is also one of the best philosophers, critics, and psychologists, between repressive structures and ideological structures. But at the same time, there is a clear affinity between Gramsci's hegemony as well as Foucault's discursive practices, since all of these concern the way power is internalized by those whom it disempowers, so that it does not have to be constantly enforced externally in society. Next writer is Greenblatt, Stephen Greenblatt. He was American literary critic and founder of New Historicism. And New Historicism is also known as cultural poetics. Greenblatt used the term New Historicism in his book The Power of Forms in the English Renaissance. He took New Historicism as a literary theory that attempts to understand intellectual history through an engagement between literature and cultural context. So, students, one and most important thing is that there is a sort of affinity between literature and cultural context. Greenblatt believes that text is shaped by external agents around itself, and author's mindset is shaped by social and cultural responses. Between author engagements and the world, there are these connections. First connection is that text is shaped by external events around itself. There are different external social, cultural, political, socio-economical agents. And then you may say that the author's mindset is shaped by social and cultural responses. There is a response between author's engagement with the world. These engagements are able to create to make some mindset for the author. Greenblatt is prominent for his extensive works on Shakespeare. For example, he had edited the Norton Shakespeare in 2015, as well as the general editor of contributor to the Norton Anthology of English Literature, which played its major role in creating a clearer difference between new historicism as well as old historicism. Towards the Poetics of Culture, which published in 1987, Greenblatt discussed how art and society are interrelated. So far as Greenblatt is concerned, he said Shakespeare's plays are supposed to be read in connection with cultural practices and social political realities of the times in which we live. The context of Shakespeare's plays are cultural practices through which we can analyze Shakespeare's plays, but the analysis will be incomplete if we don't try to highlight the time which we are living in. Shakespearean dramas are not meant to be read or understood purely as works of fiction, but such artistic works must create an academic discourse where readers and scholars engage with the politics of the culture in their times. There are some advantages and disadvantages of new historicism, and as I have written in the slides, students, you all are supposed to learn these advantages and disadvantages by heart. The first point is, although new historicism is founded upon post-structuralist thinking, it is written in far more accessible way for the most part avoiding post-structuralism's characteristically dense style and vocabulary. It presents its data and draws its conclusions, and if it is sometimes easy to challenge the way the data is interpreted, this is partly because the empirical foundation on which the interpretation rests is made openly available for scrutiny. The point is that data must be collected, analyzed, and then it must be able to be scrutinized. Number two is material itself is often fascinating and is wholly distinctive in the context of literary studies where student feels that he entered into a new territory. The uncultured, pared down feel of the essays which results from non-citing previous discussions of the literary work gives them a stark and dramatic air. Last one is the political edge of new historicist writing is always sharp, but at the same time it avoids problems frequently encountered in straight to Marxist critique, seems less overtly polemical and more willing to allow the historical evidence its own voice. So the last point is what do new historicists do? Number one, they juxtapose literary and non-literary texts, reading the former in the light of the latter. The literary text can be read in the light of the non-literary text. They try to thereby to, to defamiliarize the canonical literary text, detaching it from the accumulated weight of previous literary scholarship and seeing it as if new. The concept of defamiliarization, meaning any familiar object is going to be presented in an unfamiliar way to the people. That is called this very act which is presented by the rule number 2. Number 3, they focus attention on issues of state power and how it is maintained, on patriarchal structure and their perpetuation, and on the process of colonization with its accompanying mindset. Patriarchal structure where father, brother, husband, son are. The male are all the time dominated. So the state power shows that the head of the state is all the time powerful, and there is a sort of comparison and difference between masses and the head of the state. Last one is they make use of aspects of the post-structuralist outlook, especially Derrida's notion that every facet of reality is textualized, and Foucault's idea of social structure as determined by dominant discursive practices. And now these are the questions. All of you are here to understand the whole lecture and then do these questions. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.